Good Lord, it's coming up right behind him.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Springfield Googleplex, the movie podcast for Simpson fans, brought to you by thatshelf.com. Every episode, we talk about a movie parodied on The Simpsons. Maybe it was The Simpsons that introduced us to the film, or maybe when we finally saw it, we realized, hey, that's where that Simpson joke came from. Regardless, each week we pick one that one of us hasn't seen or hasn't seen in a while, watch it, and come together to discuss. I'm your host, Adam Scholes, and joining me as always is the Jones to my Ripley, my co-host, Nate Storing. Again, I think you gave me one of the best options this time, which is
but I get to be Jones, and Jones is great, so...
Yeah, that's true. Although I'm horribly allergic to cats, so, my love of Jones is maybe mitigated by that. But this week, we watched Ridley Scott's Alien from 1979, and we are joined by a very special guest to help us explore this classic of sci-fi and horror. He's an Emmy Award-winning writer and producer. In the 90s, he worked on some of the great teen TV shows of our childhood like Daria, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and Space Ghost Coast to Coast. In the 2000s, he joined the world of primetime animation with Futurama and American Dad, and today you can find him in the writer's room of The Simpsons. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Vebber. Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, happy to be here.
This is so exciting.
In this cyberspace.
In this cyberspace, exactly. Yeah. Yes, a more appropriate place or way to do this for an episode like this, I can't think of. Especially that Black Mirror parody. This feels all very appropriate. Well, you might remember Alien from such Simpsons episodes as Season 2's Treehouse of Horror, Season 5's Boy Scouts in the Hood, Deep Space Homer, and Sweet Seymour Skinner's Badass Song, possibly Season 10's Treehouse of Horror 9, and Season 31's Thanksgiving of Horror, the episode we will be looking at today. But before we do that, we want to get to know you a little bit more, Dan. People know you best as like a TV writer and producer, but what are you like as a movie fan? What are some of your favorite movies and directors?
Anything Kubrick. I just watched Barry Lyndon the other night and was as blown away as the first time I watched it. I am a big sci-fi and horror fan.
Okay.
I'm one of the few people who actually has the Shudder channel, so I can watch trashy horror movies whenever I want.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's and we're kind of in a horror renaissance. There's a lot of great new horror movies coming out lately. Some occasionally good science fiction movies, but yeah, I would say that those are my two favorite genres.
That's awesome. This will air much later than we recorded it, but I just saw Weapons on Tuesday. I don't know if you guys have seen that yet.
You finally saw Weapons.
It's so good.
I haven't seen it yet.
I saw it twice opening weekend.
Oh,
Amazing.
wow. Okay, there you go. And did you like it? I mean, you saw it twice, so I'm assuming yes, but...
Yes, and it's great. It's really good on the second viewing, too, because you get to see the whole Rashomon thing and how everything fits together, and it's really well done. And not necessarily a horror movie so much as a thriller, I don't think, but I loved it.
I loved it too, and it's. I thought it was very, very funny, which I guess the director doesn't necessarily agree with. But the
director has said that.
He says it's not intentionally funny. He wasn't necessarily intending it to be funny.
The scene where they have the tray full of hot dogs that they put between themselves. I mean, that's
the
comedy.
The Benny Hill sequence near the end, I thought, there's no way this can't be.
It's flat out comedy.
Yeah.
It's the best chase since Raising Arizona.
Exactly. So, Nate, you definitely need to.
I know. I'm going to get there this weekend, I think. But I've heard nothing but great things about it. So, looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So, Dan, I heard that you grew up in Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin. What was it like to see movies when you were a kid there? Did you go to the theater? Was it a big rental thing? What was it like?
Well, I normally would go to the theater that Whitefish Bay's big theater that they had was called the Fox Bay. I think because Fox Point was next to Whitefish Bay, so they kind of got both communities and their names crammed in there. The one thing I remember about Fox Bay is that they had, when they got E.T. ran for 9 months.
Wow.
And I don't know if they actually had enough people coming to see it that justified it, but 9 months. And it's not like they had other movies. This was a single screen theater.
Wow.
So, I saw a lot of movies at Fox Bay. And then one thing that we did in Wisconsin, which I think people did everywhere at that time, we had a lot of drive-ins as well, and drive-in movie culture is something that I miss terribly. When I first saw T2, it was at a drive-in, for example.
That's cool.
And it was,
classic.
I just have such great memories of, like being on a summer night, like sitting on the roof of the car. It just, I really miss that whole experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, looking back on it, I'm such a nerd these days about, I want all my movies to be in 4K and I want them to, and I can't imagine that if I went back and looked at the quality of the movies as they actually projected them back then, I would be very underwhelmed today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you bet.
Dan, you've also, like we mentioned in our intro, you worked on a bunch of these sort of like shows that were pretty key texts for like 90s kids like Nate and I. Is there anything unique about the sensibility of The Simpsons that sort of differentiates it from those shows that you worked on?
Well, I certainly don't think that there's a vastly different sensibility between The Simpsons and Futurama.
Sure.
But because it's both of them are Matt Groening at the top of the chain. But certainly like Daria, Space Ghost Coast to Coast was one of the first really like just incredibly meta shows that I can remember. And I loved working on it for that reason, because there were no other outlets for meta humor at that point.
Yeah.
I was working at The Onion back then.
Yep.
And, everything that I wrote for The Onion was some sort of meta joke or referential joke. So being able to do that was really, really cool, being able to write on Space Ghost. And Daria was just a chance to really write for a character who was just very much my voice, as she was for, so many people our age, just that very incredibly cynical worldview and deadpan delivery. I think those two shows were different from The Simpsons in, for those reasons, although we do occasionally do some really good meta humor on The Simpsons. And then there's such a vast difference between The Simpsons and Family Guy, even though they're both shows ostensibly about just a family with a father at the top of the show. They're very different sensibilities. And I'm actually working on American Dad. I think I'm one of the only people who worked for both Seth MacFarlane and Matt Groening. So that's my big claim to fame.
There you go.
Yeah, for sure. And so when you did join The Simpsons, was there like a parody that you immediately knew you wanted to do on the show?
Not so much. When I first joined The Simpsons, I was pretty much just stunned at the fact that I had gotten a job at The Simpsons, which was has always been my brass ring.
Right.
And it took me like 4 years between when they said that they would hire me and when I actually got hired, just because of other job commitments and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I was just so overwhelmed with working for The Simpsons that I wasn't at that point really trying to get my own stuff into it. So much as I was just really into like working together with the people that were there and figuring out the form of the show from the inside out. I'm trying to think like movie parodies that I really wanted to do. I mean, certainly I'd love to do a take on The Big Lebowski, which they haven't really done yet.
Oh, yeah.
Although they did do we have done a really good Fargo parody. A lot of the other, genre movies, either horror or sci-fi, had already been parodied in Treehouse of Horrors.
Sure.
Because when I came on the show 10 years ago, it had already been, 27 years worth of shows.
Yeah.
So a lot of you mentioned Alien is in the episode Thanksgiving of Horror, but as you mentioned, it was parodied several times before that on The Simpsons. So it's difficult, in fact, to find new movies or old movies that we haven't done and to really mine them for comedy. So it's something that we're always thinking about.
Yeah, that's one of the fun things about this sort of like database that Nate has so lovingly crafted, is we sort of have a great overview of like what genres get parodied a lot versus what genres are sort of overlooked. And Nate, if I'm not mistaken, it's like Westerns is sort of the...
Yeah, Westerns
and
are really
rom-coms?
not parodied very often. But lots of genre stuff, right? Like certainly sci-fi and horror is up there. And then the same stuff that you'd find on like the AFI Top 100 has also been parodied a lot.
Sure,
which,
yeah.
Kind of makes a lot of sense. But yeah, Westerns.
I think there's a parody of The Godfather in every episode of The Simpsons.
Pretty much,
in some form.
When we started the show, we did a pilot that has never aired and will never air. I'm pretty sure that I've burned the tapes. But on Citizen Kane, because of that sort of the running gag of like you could rebuild Citizen Kane from the amount of parodies that have been done on the show.
Yes, exactly.
And one of these days, I'm going to actually take up that challenge and see just how much I can reconstruct of the movie using
It is
the
a lot.
references. But there's a lot there. So I know you also started your career as a cartoonist and had your own comic strip called, I believe it was called Adventure.
Yes.
Do you get to
That's right.
make use of that sort of cartoonist part of your brain when you're writing for The Simpsons? I imagine it's a very sort of different style of writing.
Well, it absolutely. I mean, and as you've seen, with the exception of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, everything that I've worked on in my career has been primetime animation, or in the case of Daria, MTV animation. But it comes in handy, particularly when, and this happened more on Futurama than on The Simpsons for me, but back in the day before, when storyboards still were delivered to us on paper, as opposed to, in animatics that we could watch on TV, there was a lot of chances to, take a frame of that and say, oh, this is really good, but I'd prefer it if it looks a little more like this. And then I would get to draw, the way that I pictured it. So I, in that sense, I got to use my cartooning skills. I would say, and The Simpsons now is such a well-oiled machine that by the time that we see the initial animation, they're normally in such good condition that we rarely have, really major notes about how we want something to look different. Right. But I think on the whole, it has really helped me. I mean, all my life, I wanted to be a cartoonist first and foremost. And, I think, when I was in college, I realized, and doing my daily comic strip, I was making my living off being a cartoonist, but living in Madison, Wisconsin at that time, you could make your living by making $20 a week or something.
Do you have that urge to get back to cartooning at any point?
I find that, when you work 9 to 5, 5 days a week, as we do, that, when I get home, I want to ingest other people's media as opposed to creating more of my own.
Totally.
And I also have I've had this cynical discovery of when I think of doing a comic strip, I think, okay, but who can I sell this to? How many eyes can I get on this?
Right.
I've kind of lost the love of it just from the wanting to create something, point of view. And it's really my hope that, in my retirement, for example, that I'm going to get to go back into that and re-explore that a lot more, because I really do miss it. I miss the process of, putting ink on paper was just a really zen, amazing feeling. And so I'd love to get back into that.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that's kind of what this podcast is for us, at least for me. Adam is actually doing he's editing and at shoots all day, and then he's coming to do this. I don't get to do any of that stuff in my day job, so this is my creative outlet in that way.
This is a nice excuse to have to watch him, to tell my wife, oh no, I gotta watch this movie tonight. We've got a Simpsons writer this week, so
it's like having a gym buddy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm keeping you accountable.
Exactly.
I have to watch this movie that I've seen 50 times.
Right, exactly.
I need to watch it again.
You're watching this again? But no, I mean, look, I'll take any excuse to rewatch Alien, and this was a good one. And speaking of, let's talk about the episode Thanksgiving of Horror, Season 31, Episode 8, written by Dan Vebber and directed by Rob Oliver.
One of our best directors, far and away. Rob Oliver is just such a great guy and such a great animator. When we get the initial animations back from him, we're always just really impressed with the quality of it.
Yeah, the look and feel of this episode is so cinematic, right?
Yeah.
And with 3 very distinct styles in each segment, it's really quite something.
One of the amazing things, again, about, Nate and I have been watching The Simpsons basically since it's been on the air. We were both born in 88, so it effectively has existed as long as we have. So it's just always been a part of our DNA, but rewatching it on this show, that's the thing that I'm struck by, that I don't think the show necessarily gets enough credit for, is how well animated and directed the show can be. Some of these episodes we've covered, it's stunning the work that these directors are doing. So it's nice to get to shout them out when we can.
I do miss, there was a point where it became all episodes were done on computer as opposed to hand-drawn cells. Mm-hmm. And I really do miss the look of it when it was actual cell animation. Mm-hmm. But I also understand that it's, obviously much easier and, much more profitable for the show to be able to do it on computer and to be able to do all the editing on computer. So
Yeah, for sure.
I appreciate elements of the new look of it, but I am quite nostalgic for how it used to look back in those days.
One of the specific aesthetic things that I always love going back to the old episodes is I forget what exactly it's called, but the sort of shadow, the like halo effect around the characters, which like, I'm always like, they could probably add that digitally, like, you know, to just like, you know, make it have that feel.
There are some episodes that are coming up in which, without giving any spoilers away, the episode incorporates scenes from those days.
There you go.
And has scenes from those days then go into a new story. And so the animators did do that. They did on their computer figure out a way to make it look like it was cell animated.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, I know it's like back then, it probably drove the animators crazy because it's not it's not the way it's supposed to look.
Well, they literally in the commentaries will call it out and be like, "Oh, you can see the cell shadow. Like this is so annoying." And it's like, no, that's what we love now.
Now it occurs to me that actually it's not a spoiler because the episode has already aired. The episode Bart's Birthday.
Right.
Yes, I was thinking. Yeah.
And that's what I'm referring to when, you know, we would have the episode where Homer jumps over Springfield Gorge on the skateboard, but then we postulated that it originally had a different ending. And so when we animated that ending, it was done in that really old school style.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I remember exactly that moment. And it is impressive. It's like pretty hard to notice you've added in this new component, but that's the thing that I'm always nostalgic for, even though it's like a little tiny detail.
Yeah.
Well, this episode specifically, as Nate alluded to, it's 3 different stories, much like the Treehouse of Horror sort of setup, but this one is Thanksgiving of Horror. And the Simpson family reenacts Apocalypto as turkeys. An AI version of Marge tries to steal real Marge's family. And finally, Bart, Lisa, and their friends try to survive a sentient cranberry sauce monster on a spaceship. So I have to ask, Dan, where did the inspiration for all this come from?
Our showrunner, Matt Selman, came to me and said, like, he wanted to do a Halloween episode, but have it be for Thanksgiving instead. And we would call it Treehouse of Horror Presents. And so this was the first of the, now like once a year, we're doing Treehouse of Horror Presents episodes in addition to the Treehouse of Horror episodes.
Cool.
And so he came to me and he said, you know, he had the idea of the turkeys and he said, you know, come up with whatever other Thanksgiving themed shows you could come up with. And I came up with the middle segment and the final segment. But the middle segment that I came up with was pretty early in the process thrown away, and they decided to do a Black Mirror parody. But the first sequence with the turkeys and the last sequence, that's the parody of Alien, those were very much like my ideas. Like, you know, let's do a take on Alien, you know, but the monster is made of cranberry sauce.
Can we ask what was the abandoned idea in the middle?
It was another take on Black Mirror, on the Black Mirror episode. It just was a different type of story. I'm embarrassed to admit I do not even remember what my original story was. I was thinking of this today when I was driving into work. I really should have referenced that before I came on here tonight so I would have an answer for you. But I pretty much have forgotten what we did because I just so got invested into the Black Mirror parody.
Well, fair enough.
I love the idea of like the holiday episodes of The Simpsons. The show's been on long enough that I've got DVD compilations of Christmas episodes, of Halloween episodes. I'm sure there's enough to do like Valentine's Day episodes and even Easter episodes at this point. So it's if there's any show that could say, let's do a Thanksgiving episode, but then also make it a spooky Thanksgiving episode, it makes sense that it's The Simpsons that decide to reinvent what that holiday can be. So
yes, exactly.
Adam's a very seasonal viewer. He likes to watch his Halloween episodes at Halloween, his Christmas episodes at Christmas, and so on. So, like, he appreciates having, like, a full calendar.
Yeah, it's true. Although, of course, being a Canadian, it means that my Thanksgiving is a little bit different than your Thanksgiving, so I'll have to adjust my timing schedule. But
yeah, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, the Thanksgiving of Horror is actually pretty appropriate in Canada.
Well, I mean, that's the funny thing is that up here, Thanksgiving's always in October, so, like, having a spooky Thanksgiving actually kind of, like, dovetails with when I start watching sort of like a lot of horror movies. So this will slot in very nicely in my seasonal viewing.
When does Canadian Halloween happen?
Same day. Same day. Yeah,
same day.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just Thanksgiving.
As I understand it from some of the Canadians on our staff, you had this thing called Halloween apples or something that you would say when you're trick-or-treating. Have you ever heard of this?
No, I don't think
so.
Okay,
maybe it was just an Ottawa thing or something, but
or a generational thing,
possibly.
maybe.
Yeah,
Or
a
just
generational thing.
I mean, the only I know, granted, Canada and the U.S. share the same, but I think like Mother's Day is at a different time in the U.K. Like holidays are weird. You think they all line up, but they don't necessarily all line up. But yeah, no, Halloween is still October 31st, and then October 30th is Devil's Night. I do remember that being.
Oh yeah.
Although like I don't know if that's actually a thing or.
It's a thing in the movie The Crow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Totally.
But that's I think the only example of it in pop culture that I can think of.
Yeah. Dan, when this episode won the 2020 Writers Guild Award for animation, Matt Selman accepted the award on your behalf.
That was
And
awesome. Yeah.
He said that you think award shows are stupid and that he had to threaten to fire you to get you to submit the script. Is that true, or was that just a gag?
That is all true. That is the case. I forget what the specific threat was. I think it was just he wore me down, and I was like, fine, I'll submit it. I didn't think that it really had a shot of winning anything. And so when it did win that, I think him doing the acceptance speech for me was far funnier than I would have been doing the acceptance speech for me.
Fair
so
enough.
I think that worked out pretty well. But I get to have the statue, which is cool.
Well,
that
that feels more appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Nate, as the king of references on the show, let's talk us through the reference for our audience who may not be as familiar with it.
Yeah, so as we were talking about, there's 3 segments in this episode. The last segment is really a riff on Alien. And we're going to kind of dissect it as we talk about the movie itself. But Dan, what made you want to parody Alien on The Simpsons?
Well, I wanted to do something that was really overtly science fiction and, really, really scary.
Yeah.
And I think that third sequence accomplishes both of those things. I mean, yeah, it's a cartoon, so it's never going to be actually really scary, but we did do stuff that was much more gory and horrifying than we typically can get away with on the show. So I definitely wanted to do that. I definitely wanted it to be a spaceship full of the kids. And yeah, I mean, it just was a cool way to re-examine the movie Alien. I obviously there are some differences, like the cranberry monster is more inspired by a Dungeons and Dragons monster, the gelatinous blob, than it's inspired by Alien, because, specifically like having it eat you and then you can see its bones through its skin. I think that's very much a Dungeons and Dragons thing.
So cool. Such a cool like aesthetic and just like a cool way to, I hate to say this, but a cool way to kill people. Like it's just, I hadn't really seen anything like that before. I thought that was such a nice touch.
Yeah, in terms of the rest of it, like an alien that is on the ship and you never know when it's going to pop up out of the vents or whatever, and it's killing people where not necessarily there are other people there. So,
right.
The crew never knows exactly what's happening until near the end. They're noticing maybe that people are missing, but they're not really understanding what's causing it. And I thought that was cool.
Totally.
I'm curious, Dan, like when you guys are approaching a parody, do you tend to revisit the original material in advance, or do you work from memory? Because I'm always sort of struck that a lot of the times that the parodies are of those like iconic, memorable moments from films. I mean, obviously every once in a while there's like a deep cut or a reference that, again, like we say on the show, you go, oh, that's what that's from. But what is that like? When you're sitting down to write this, did you go out and rent Alien and rewatch it and make notes about what beats you wanted to cover, or would you
rent Alien? As if I would need to rent Alien.
Fair.
No, I did rewatch Alien, but that was more like you were describing watching it recently. That was more just because I love watching that movie at any time and any excuse to do it. Generally, I would say that when we do parodies, if it's a more obscure movie that we haven't seen that many times, people will definitely go and rewatch the movie or rewatch a movie that somebody points out is thematically very similar. But when it's a movie that is so tattooed into my brain as Alien, I could have written the entire thing without a rewatch of it. I know every scene of that movie. I know every event that the alien drops out of. We really tried to parody that style of horror where it just appears out of nowhere and kills you and you don't even have a chance to fight back, really.
That's
totally.
Great.
I mean, I'm curious, were there any other like movie reference points for the monster? Because like there are lots of like ones that I could think of, like Life, or I think there's this, like the Star Trek episode, the first Star Trek episode, the Blob, like
the Blob,
the Abyss, Pandorum. Like, were any of those inspirations or just coincidences?
I think they were just coincidences, but I mean, in a way, it's the episode is an homage to all of those movies,
Sure.
But I would say that it was a coincidence in terms of, you didn't necessarily go into it saying we're going to parody 3 different movies. I really went into it thinking this is going to be Alien.
Yeah.
And like I said, if anything, it was inspired by the gelatinous blob in Dungeons and Dragons more so than anything. So
I love that.
Yeah.
Were there any other references in that segment that you were like particularly thinking about that were maybe like smaller moments? I mean, I caught a few that I'm curious about, but I wonder if any jump out. So I was thinking, when the kids are all at the table with their, like, I think it's like a turkey made out of yeast paste.
Yes.
And they're banging on the table with their forks and going gobble, gobble. Yeah. I was thinking of Freaks.
Yes, absolutely. That was a reference to Freaks. Yes.
Okay.
Gobble, gobble, don't be jerky. Pass the yams and carve the turkey.
Amazing, because so that movie I'm fascinated by. I've never seen it. But from doing all this research on The Simpsons, it actually, I think, is the very first movie reference on anything Simpsons. It's one of the only ones that appears in the shorts on the Tracy Ullman show.
Oh, really? Did they say...
One of Us.
One of
I think
Us.
is what it is, maybe. Okay. Yeah. So, I now know that scene just because of The Simpsons, and I've still never seen the movie. So that's one that we'll have to do on the podcast one day. But, yeah.
Yes.
And I feel like I saw a couple Star Trek references, probably more to the TV series, but like I think there were some sound effects in there. The captain's log, the replicator, all of that seemed sort of Star Trek.
The replicator, of course, was very much Star Trek The Next Generation inspired. The idea that you can just make anything you want in the future in a little microwave oven.
Except for duplicating cranberry sauce, of course.
Exactly. That was the problem. That's what led to all the problems came directly from that.
Okay, this one's a bit of a stretch, but I am curious. On the machine, there's these buttons that say Zip Zap Zorp. What is Zorp? Because like at camp, I remember playing a game that was Zip Zap Zop. Is Zorp a thing, or is it?
No, I think what that is Selman has a lot of go-to phrases that he will go to, and like he'll call people ding dongs. That's one of them. Zip Zap Zorp is something that he says instead of saying etc. sometimes. So he'll say like, oh, I did this, I did that, and Zip Zap Zorp. And so I think that was, I forget whether it was Selman who suggested we actually do it or if we did it as a direct reference to Selman. But I think of him when I think of Zip Zap Zorp.
So when I hear Zorp, I think of Parks and Rec, because Zorp is the name of the like cult god in that show. And there's these characters always saying, Hail Zorp. So
I didn't know that.
That's what I was thinking of. Okay, one last one in this segment. I was curious, was there any inspiration for the alien world at the end? I mean, it's kind of like the crashed ship's got a little bit of alien in it, but like the world is so distinctive. Was it referencing anything? I was getting a bit of like Dr. Zeus almost or something.
Yeah, maybe like Avatar. I think we gave some notes when it was being animated that we wanted it to look like Pandora from Avatar.
Okay.
So I think that's probably what you're seeing there.
I thought the aliens also, like, although they have more limbs maybe than, I'm trying to remember the term that they use, but in Prometheus, the big white guys in Prometheus, it got a little bit of that vibe as well. So
the engineers,
which would obviously be appropriate considering the alien source. So
yeah, I mean, I think we wanted to have aliens that in some way we sold the idea of these represent Native Americans, and so these aliens have like fleshy flaps that look kind of like a Native American headdress. But that's what was causing that, I think.
Right, and hence the Avatar connection there. Yeah, makes sense. What about the rest of the episode? So, I mean, obviously, we have to talk about the first segment, which is this parody of Apocalypto.
Yeah.
Is that a movie that you love, or was that mostly Matt?
I love Apocalypto. I love it in spite of the fact that Mel Gibson directed it.
Sure.
Fair enough.
It's a little bit canceled these days, but
problematic fave, sure.
yeah, but I've seen Apocalypto, boy, at least 10 times, and I just love it so much. It's such a tight, well-told story where they don't speak any English in it. It's so amazing to me what he did in that. I don't know how accurate the language translations he had in that movie actually are. Like, if I were actually an Incan, I might watch that episode through some magic time traveling television and say, like, what the hell are they saying here? It's not accurate, but I don't know. It feels accurate to me, and it's definitely one of my favorite movies.
I will say the parody was enough to make me go, if the movie's as fun and entertaining as this parody, I think I actually am really going to enjoy it. So I will check it out. I wanted to bring this up, though. Nate, I don't know if you remember, when we were in high school, Nate worked at the local theater, and along with a bunch of our other friends. And when this was still in the era of like film, so all the trailers and all the films were still on 35 mil. And when they finished with trailers, they would just bring them and give them to me. And so I still have a few of them like in my office. I have the Casino Royale teaser and a couple other things. But they gave me the teaser trailer for Apocalypto, which famously has this like one frame shot of Mel Gibson with his arm around one of the like native characters and so I literally like pulled the 35 millimeter print apart trying to find the shot, and I found it, and I like had it hanging in my bedroom for the better part of
That's so funny.
So yeah,
I didn't know that.
That's my only
so
knowledge
funny.
of Apocalypto is that famous shot in the trailer, which I assume is not in the film. But needless to say, I do think I'm gonna have to check it out now. So
Apocalypto for me also is a big touchstone, because one of the first times that my son ever spoke was we were sitting watching Apocalypto, and I was just thinking, like, he's not going to register what's going on here in this movie. He's not going to be traumatized by this. And, the scene where they're on the giant pyramid, and at the top of the pyramid, they're sacrificing these people one by one, which we did that almost frame by frame in the Simpsons episode.
Yeah.
But they would do it one by one, cut their heads off, and then throw their heads down the side of the pyramid. And I just remember my kid watching that and jumping up and pointing at the TV and saying, "Uh-oh."
And you were also like, "Uh-oh."
Yeah, so I was like, "Oh, okay." I guess he understands that these are people getting their heads cut off. Okay,
Right.
great.
Well, you got to start somewhere. So
Yeah.
start them young, I suppose. That's
It was
funny.
always very important to me, though, that my kids be exposed to lots of different types of movies, because I didn't want to have to censor myself when I was watching stuff.
Right.
I didn't want to have to be like, oh, I can't let Calvin watch this, or I can't let him watch that. And one thing, actually, speaking of Alien, or rather Aliens, that I can point to is one of the cool things about DVDs / Blu-rays is all of the making of stuff that they put on them.
Totally.
And so before I showed my kid Aliens, I showed him the making of documentary where it shows, like, okay, here's how they did the Queen. It's this giant puppet.
Right.
And here you can see the guys in the puppet. And so they really could understand that, this is just pretend. And I'd used that in several different movies, where I've used the making of documentaries to prepare my kids for stuff. So
That's
a
cool.
great idea. I have a couple friends who have 4-year-olds. They're not showing them Aliens, but that has basically seen like one scary cartoon and is now like, movies are bad. Don't like movies. And so, but that's a good tip. I'm going to pass that on to them.
The making ofs on that Alien box set are just incredible. I mean, we're going to talk about them later, but they are incredible.
incredibly extensive. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you determine who got to be a turkey and who got to be a pilgrim? I mean, it makes sense that like some of the more, shall we say, like religious characters are the pilgrims, and maybe some of the more like wet blanket characters like Milhouse, but Dr. Hibbert gets to be a turkey as opposed to a pilgrim.
Yeah, I think that was a chance for us to do Dr. Hibbert's catchphrase in the mouth of a turkey.
Which is very
Right.
We really went into it thinking like, okay, this is Apocalypto, so what it's going to be about is about a family of turkeys who get kidnapped by the more advanced culture. So, we knew from the beginning that the core of it would have to be the Simpsons as turkeys.
Of course.
And then I think as we were writing it, we just had opportunities to, let's see what Nelson would sound like saying "ha-ha" as a turkey. Let's see what, Dr. Hibbert would sound like, as a turkey. And it's also like a chance to give those characters, if I remember correctly, like the Flanders turkey gets a really gruesome death. Like he's
right.
He, I think, is the first one where he gets shot and his head blows apart in slow motion. Mm-hmm. And I think that was just a way of like, venting at Ned Flanders as Homer would do.
He was a zombie?
Yeah, exactly.
But Nate, there's a couple, I mean, yes, there's the Apocalypto parody, but it seems like there's a few other little hidden parodies in there as well.
Yeah, so I'm curious about these ones. These are always like, there's always references where you're like, I don't know, is that a reference or not? So one of them was, is the bird attack at the end of the first segment at all inspired by the birds?
I guess you could say it was. Certainly, I'm sure at some point in the writer's room we said, okay, and then the birds are going to attack and it's going to look like the birds,
Right.
We casually would have mentioned it, but I wouldn't say that it was an overt parody of that.
Right.
Sure. Okay, here's another one from the Simpsons wiki. They believe I love these because sometimes they're totally outlandish. So they say the scene where a rabbit makes a throat-cutting gesture to Turkey Homer mirrors a scene from the 1993 film Schindler's List.
Maybe it does, but there's but that's referencing a scene in Apocalypto. There's a scene where they're being marched as slaves, all tied to sticks and stuff. Right. And as they walk by this little kid in the jungle, the little kid makes that gesture.
There you go.
So that's a direct Apocalypto thing. I mean,
do you think Mel Gibson was referencing Schindler's List?
Maybe Mel Gibson was referencing. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if that's a popular film in the Gibson household.
Yeah.
Right.
But
now that I think of it, yes, that scene is in Schindler's List as well. Yeah, it is. But when we did it for this episode, it was referencing Apocalypto.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. So, and then in the second segment, obviously, mostly it's Black Mirror. Were there any movies though that were getting into the mix there?
I remember the second segment as being just flat out a parody of the Black Mirror Christmas episode, where one of the things that happens in that is that the person is trapped inside a home assistant. So that's definitely where that came from. I can't think of any specific movie references that we had in that segment. But if you noticed any, let me know.
I mean, one that I was curious about was at the end, Homer's face falls off and it turns out he's a robot. That felt very Westworld to me. We recently covered that.
Yeah, that's very Westworld. Yeah, I mean, we definitely said at the time, and their faces will fall off and it'll be just like the robots in Westworld. Or we were aware of that for sure.
Sure.
I love that moment so much, like especially the way robot Homer's inners look. Like it's such a great visual gag.
Yeah.
One of the things we've sort of been discussing, and Dan, I don't know if this is something you can speak to or not, but we've been noticing that we tend to clock the visual parodies and then like dialogue parodies. But The Simpsons makes heavy use of like musical parodies or like score references. And when the AI Marge is doing Thanksgiving prep, there's this great piece of score that it's a little bit Black Mirror-ish, but to me, it sort of reminded me of like Tron Legacy or even like the Mr. Robot score. I don't know if that was intentional, like if there was a specific direction there or...
I just remember we said, let's have the score be very minimal and a little like electronic, but not in a Daft Punk way, and we did tell the musicians to reference that Black Mirror episode for sure,
right?
So they knew where that was coming from. I mean, and for the Alien segment, that was flat out. We said to our composers, do Jerry Goldsmith's score for Alien.
It's 100%
so good.
Yeah,
it's such a good parody.
Super recognizable. I watched the episode before I rewatched the movie, and so there was a moment in the score where I was like, is that Jaws? And then I watched the movie and I was like, no, it's definitely Alien, but Alien is kind of doing Jaws.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
One
references
last one.
Within references.
Yes, exactly. Okay, one last one. In the credits, you have a great credit sequence here with like the Bart Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade float.
Oh, I was so glad we were able to do that. It was and that we were able to get the rights to this precise piece of music. There was a YouTube video going around called Disturbing Strokes. It was the Different Strokes opening, but with that music in it. and it plays out as like this very creepy sequence of like this old man taking these two young African-American kids into his limousine, and the final shot is him like leading them into his building. And it's so funny. It's so funny. And the idea of the giant Bart Simpson balloon is something that's just so inherently horrifying that we thought it would be. And the fact that it was a Thanksgiving parade, the perfect button for the episode.
Totally.
So I was so glad that we were able to get the rights to do that and to use that specific cut of music.
That is so funny.
It all came together perfectly, yeah.
Would you know if the music was like an original thing for that YouTube video?
I forget what. I'm sure it was from some movie soundtrack, but I'm not sure right now exactly what that movie soundtrack was.
Supposedly,
at the time, I might have known. Yeah.
Supposedly, it's from The House That Dripped Blood. That's
okay.
That's what I found online. I have no idea if that's true or not.
That sounds familiar. And at the time, we probably did realize that that's what it was from, and that's who we had to get the rights from.
Hey everybody, it's Adam from the future with a little editor's note. The cue is actually called Night Walk from the film The Dorm That Dripped Blood, also known as Pranks, and was composed by Christopher Young. Okay, back to the episode.
But it's not really a reference to that. It's a reference to the Disturbing Strokes video.
yeah, exactly. In my mind, it was a reference to the Disturbing Strokes.
That's so great.
But yeah, I mean, overall, I do love how insanely violent this episode is.
I was going to say, knowing the battle with censors over the years, like what you guys were able to, I want to say get away with, but like it is insanely violent, but still in a very comedic sort of like silly way that it's
and
not
that's
like
how we can get away
disturbing.
With it.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, speaking of meta humor, you kill Maud Flanders again in this episode.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good one. And then,
Pilgrims.
Yes. And then just the sort of deboning skin suit sort of thing in the Alien episode is so good. And it's just got such a distinctive look. And the moment
that could be referring to any number of horror movies or science fiction movies, like literally the skeleton being pulled out of the body is such a horrifying idea. And so I was glad we were able to do that.
Probably the highest compliment I could pay to this episode is that you introduced a couple new like Simpsons-isms for me that I've already used in my own personal life, just like out in the wild.
Okay.
So the first one is from the introduction, the Frankenstein-inspired introduction with Marge, of course, as you must do. When she's explaining why you're doing 2 horror episodes, she says, "What with the grim specter of everything," which I was like, "Oh wow, what a multi-purpose phrase that is these days."
Yeah.
So that one's become part of my vocabulary, and then the other one is from the second segment, Homer saying "chillingly plausible." And both of those are just like 2 of those like multi-purpose phrases that The Simpsons is at its very best. So
use them in your everyday life by all means.
You'll get a royalty
one thing
check
I
when we
remember
do.
really liking was when Wiggum falls off the cliff. He yells "odds and bodkins," which was like this very old timey way of saying. I don't know if we can swear on here, but saying "OS word."
Sure, you're allowed to swear. You can say whatever you want.
It was a way of saying "oh shit," as somebody in like 1850 would say it.
Right.
So, and I've always loved the phrase "odds and bodkins," and I was really glad we got to put that in there.
I have a 4-year-old, so maybe I'll start using that instead. And then if he picks that up,
it's a good all-purpose swear word.
Teacher. Exactly.
Getting all sorts of parenting tips on this episode.
Well, as we said, we kind of want to unpack the third segment, concurrently as we unpack the film. So let's get into the film. Dan, how would you sum up Alien in a sentence?
Haunted house on a spaceship.
There you go.
Perfect.
The classic description.
Yeah.
Well, we were able to track down the plot synopsis. For context, Dan, we always like to pull our plot synopsis from an obscure piece of physical media or like an original press release from the time that the film was released. And so
cool.
This time around, we've got it from the 1983 CBS Fox VHS tape, which is currently on sale for $530.92 on eBay. So if you're looking to blow some cash.
Okay.
Yeah, and I found this one. I thought this was crazy. So I did find a 1980 VHS tape, which is the year after this movie came out, but it had no description on the back, so we couldn't use it. But the crazy thing is, like, this must have been one of the like really, really early VHS releases of like a contemporary movie that people actually saw. Because like I was looking around at what else was released around like in the same year, like 1980, and it's a lot of like back catalog stuff or like really schlocky B movie stuff. So like this was really early home release territory. Yeah. So I thought that was really cool.
Do you have a VHS player? Either of you?
My parents probably still do. We used to watch VHS when we were kids, but I don't currently. I'm
a video producer by day, so like I have an obscene amount of useless equipment for work. And I have a combo VHS DVD recorder for transferring old home movies of my friends and family. So I don't watch a lot of VHSs on it, but I do still have one. So
we have this store in Los Angeles that's this boutique store called Whammy, and literally all they sell is videotapes.
Oh,
like I think they just made this deal with like anytime a video store would go out of business, they would take all of their stuff, and now they sell these videotapes. And the first time I went in there, I was like, oh my God, I'm the target audience for this store. I can't imagine how this store is going to survive. But it's been around for several years now. So at that store, I bought a used VCR, and I have a collection of a bunch of these tapes of movies that I love from that era. Right. And sometimes it's just really comfort food to watch something on VHS. Just to watch something in that looks so crappy compared to what you can do nowadays with Blu-ray and 4K.
Totally.
But the process of like putting a tape in and hearing it wind up and it's something that is really cool to do. And actually my kids have gotten into it as well. They both have VHS players as well. So
they like
watching videotapes.
I have the beautiful 4K of John Carpenter's Halloween, and obviously like it's never looked better, but that's a movie that it almost is better to watch it in like a pan and scan VHS that with the grain and everything, and you can't quite make everything out. It makes it a little bit spookier.
Yeah, horror movies in particular seem kind of well suited actually to VHS, I think.
Well, anyway, so here's how this 1983 VHS describes Alien. The ultimate in science fiction. In deep outer space, the crew of a commercial spaceship make an unscheduled landing on a barren and desolate planet for engine parts. They encounter a pulsating organism which attaches itself to one of the crew members.
They don't land for engine parts.
I know. That's totally wrong.
I didn't write the copy.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go on.
No, that's okay. We'll take it up with Fox CBS. Okay. They encounter a pulsating organism which attaches itself to one of the crew members and reproduces within his body to become the deadly alien. As each of the crew members is slain by the creature, one by one, the final confrontation between the last surviving crew members and the alien culminates in an explosive conclusion.
Literally.
Yeah. So, I mean, Dan, you've sort of alluded to this already, but like, what's your relationship with Alien? Do you remember the first time you saw it?
Alien was the first R-rated movie that I ever saw because I remember wanting to see it so badly, and it was on cable at that time. So there was a way to watch it. I was not allowed to watch it, but I made a deal with my mom. I forget what it was, but it was like if I did a certain number of chores or something, she would let me stay up late and watch Alien. And so I did. And I remember the first time watching Alien, I loved it so much, but I also fell asleep in the middle of it because it was on at a way past my bedtime.
Of course.
But yeah, I was probably like 11 at that point. So it's been a part of my movie watching life for pretty much most of my life.
What about you, Nate? Do you remember the first time you saw it?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I like Ridley Scott a lot. I think I saw Blade Runner before I saw this. And so I kind of came into it from the sci-fi side more than the horror side. As you know, Adam, I'm not as much of a horror guy, right?
For sure.
But I love sci-fi. I love world building, and Ridley Scott's so good at creating these really like incredible self-contained worlds.
Yeah.
So I think it was probably either late high school or early university, that like prime DVD buying era where, we've talked about it before. We would just like go to HMV and buy like a whole bunch of DVDs of movies we'd never seen. And just because you could get like whatever, 2 for $30. And it was like the prime era of like special editions. So there was always like amazing behind the scenes features and new commentaries and stuff. So I'm pretty sure it was like around that time that I first saw it, but I don't think it was the first Ridley Scott movie I'd seen. So
Yeah, I do remember watching it and just, I assume we're allowed to give spoilers.
Oh,
on
yeah,
this
yeah,
movie.
yeah.
The
We're
movie-
assuming our audience
But I
has
mean,
seen
you know-
this 50-year-old film.
The scene where Ash gets his head knocked off and it's revealed for the first time, oh, this guy is a robot. I just remember watching that eyes wide, like, what the is this movie?
Yeah.
Like,
Totally.
I just thought it was the coolest thing. And I loved the way that they did androids. It wasn't the typical, like, Terminator endoskeleton. It was, you know, it was all these just pumping globules and
Yes.
milk.
you know, something that was just, basically
So
milk.
much milk.
The innards is the thing that I always remember from that scene, is like when they start like actually like setting up the head and everything.
Yeah.
And there's all this stuff that's like tubes and marbles and like meats all mixed together. It's like
so amazing.
the most bonkers thing. I have no idea how they thought of that, because it just it looks absolutely insane. But yeah, no. Again, this is the amazing world building stuff that I always think of when I think of this movie and Ridley Scott in general. But
I wonder if H.R. Giger designed the look of what the androids would look like inside, or whether that was some other person on the production crew. I'm
yeah,
not
it's
sure.
interesting. I mean, like, because
But,
there were like a couple other concept artists on the film, and they're credited with things like the spaceship or spacesuits. But I haven't seen anything about who came up with the idea of the androids, actually. That's an interesting question. Adam,
As
what
for-
about you?
Yeah, I mean, Nate, this will come as no surprise to you and to our listeners. I was first introduced to this via the AFI Top 100. Which again, I don't know if it was in the top 100 or if it was in 100 years, 100 thrills, 100 spills, or whatever the scary
100 spills.
But I definitely was introduced to it through that. And of course, the downside of that is that it kind of spoiled most of the big moments for me. But I think I eventually like saw it in university, and then, you know, basically like everyone fell in love with it instantly and was like, this thing is a masterpiece. And I do distinctly remember, I probably was after university, only shortly thereafter, or maybe I was in like my last year of university. Best Buy had a sale on the Blu-ray box set, but they didn't have any in Toronto. Like, so I was at my parents' house for the weekend, and I like told my parents, I was like, I have to go to Best Buy. And my mom was like, why do you have to go to Best Buy? And I was like, I have to buy this box set that I can't get anywhere else. But I like, and then once I got it, I spent like the next week just like poring over that thing. It is, I think it's probably the greatest piece of physical media out there. Like, it is so comprehensive.
Yeah.
Yep.
And,
This is the quadrilogy, right?
well, it's the Blu-ray equivalent of the quadrilogy.
Sure.
But yes, so it takes everything that the quadrilogy did and actually improved on a few of those things. Like the Alien³ film got remastered once more, and they went back and did a bunch of work that they didn't have time or money to do the first time around, or I guess the second time around when they were doing the DVD. But yeah, so. And then it's one of those movies where I just like, every couple years I'm like, oh, I'm jonesing for some Alien time, no pun
So to
intended.
speak.
And yeah, exactly. And I'll throw it on, and you know, I oscillate between the two versions, which one I'll watch. But yeah, this movie, it's incredible. It's so good. And again, I'm less of a sci-fi guy, but much more of a sort of like horror thriller kind of person. And this tickles that itch so well.
Absolutely.
And it's why the first one is kind of my favorite of all of them, because they all sort of move further and further away from that, you know, pure horror element. But
And anytime you have like severe world building going on, it's generally is the first movie that you look to as being like, you know, this is the one that invented what the other however great the other movies are. This is the one that invented the look of it and the style of it. And so it gets a lot of extra points for that. I would say that about The Godfather as well. You know, as much as I love Godfather 2, it's like, yeah, but the first one invented
lays the
it,
groundwork.
you know?
Yo, you're preaching to the choir on this podcast. We're both big Godfather 1 champions over 2 in some ways, but yeah, no, totally. And I think like obviously Aliens is fantastic, but yeah, I think like it gets credit for doing something really interesting with that problem of like, what do you do for a sequel, right? You know, it expands the world in certain ways, but you can't top the groundwork that this one does.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that groundwork, Nate, I mean, again, it's like, give us the history of Alien. I feel like this is one of those movies where everybody kind of knows the history, but maybe you could sort of speed round us through
we're gonna blast through this. Blast through this because, again, if you want to know the backstory, there are many places that you can learn the full backstory. So we're just going to give you a little bit of context. So this is written by Dan O'Bannon and his friend Ronald Shusett. And they collaborated on the original story, which sort of evolved out of his previous film, Dark Star, which was like a dark sci-fi comedy directed by John Carpenter.
Which, if you've seen Dark Star, it's insane to think that movie was like almost Alien. Like, that movie is insane.
Yeah, totally. And so a number of studios like turned down the screenplay because it's too violent. Before finally Brandywine Productions, led by Walter Hill, Gordon Carroll, and David Geiler?
I think he pronounces it Giller, but even though there's only one L, so
Sure.
I don't. But I'm not entirely sure.
Was it called Space Beast?
Star Beast.
Star Beast. Okay.
Yeah. Exactly, which is actually the name of like a short story by Heinlein, I think, but that doesn't seem related. Anyway, yes. So yeah, it did have a different name, and eventually they were like, lose the Star Beast, Alien's cleaner. So yeah, David Giller comes on as well, and they bought the option for $1,000.
Jeez.
so
Hill,
crazy.
So Hill and Giller, though, actually like substantially rewrite the script, although Bannon does still get the final screenplay credit. They bring the revised script to Fox, telling them that Hill is actually interested in directing, which is interesting to imagine. And Alan Ladd Jr. at Fox purchases the script. He said that it reminded him of Psycho. Apparently. And of course, they had recently done Star Wars, so they're thinking, great, we can capitalize on that. But eventually, Hill becomes unavailable, and so he offers it to Ridley Scott. And at this point, Ridley Scott had just done one other movie, The Duelists, which I have never seen. I don't know, have either of you seen that?
It's very good. It's very good. He's one of those directors that he has a look that never existed before he came on the scene. He invented it, And The Duelist, you watch it and you're like, oh yeah, this is a Ridley Scott movie, clearly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they thought. They saw they're like, this guy knows how to shoot. Apparently, actually, he was inspired by Barry Lyndon a little bit for that movie.
I bet, yeah.
But the other thing that they saw in Ridley Scott, as Hill puts it, we thought that as a second-time director, we could scare him enough that he wasn't going to change the script.
Well,
so at the time, Scott said he was like not a huge fan of sci-fi, interestingly, but considered it more of like a suspense thriller. And he put together the storyboards for it in 3 weeks. And after that, the producers saw them and were like, oh, okay, we're going to like double the budget of this movie. So Fox and Brandywine decided to spend their money on special effects mostly, rather than stars. So the cast ends up being kind of a motley crew, right? Which works fantastically. Probably the biggest star on the cast, I would think at this point, is Yaphet Kotto. Because by this point, he had been in Live and Let Die as the villain Kananga. But other than that, like most of the others were just like in the ensemble in a whole bunch of other movies.
Hadn't Tom Skerritt been in a bunch of stuff at that point, though?
He'd been in MASH. MASH was like probably his biggest role at this point. The others had been in a few things, like Harry Dean Stanton had been in like Cool Hand Luke or Kelly's Heroes. Veronica Cartwright had been in Invasion of the Body Snatchers and The Birds. So like they definitely had been around, but none of them were like the sort of like leading actor, the star that you'd sort of expect in a bigger movie.
Which of course like works to the film's favor because it leaves you going the whole time. It's like none of these people are like an A-list talent who therefore is obviously going to survive, or I guess in a modern film is obviously going to be the first one picked off. So it really leaves you guessing of like, I don't know who's going to go at what point.
Who's going to go? Who's the main character?
Yeah, that too, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, Nate, I mean, this is a dumb question to ask because I think we all know, seeing as it become one of the most iconic sci-fi horrors in the history of cinema, but how did this movie do? Was it successful?
I mean, super successful, obviously. Originally, the budget was going to be like $5 million. Ends up being closer to $11 million by the time of release, but it makes almost $79 million at the box office in the original run. It's the top movie of the summer, and I love this. So on Memorial Day weekend, they showed the film for 38 hours straight at the Egyptian Theater in LA.
Oh, wow.
and at the Criterion Theater in New York. And they actually like had all of these props and set pieces and stuff that they put in the theaters.
That's
like you had to walk through part of the ship to get to the lobby. They had the space jockey in the courtyard of the movie theater. Like all this cool stuff. Apparently, though, they had a miniature of the space jockey, and within a few hours of all this being set up, it had been lit on fire.
That's tragic.
It is tragic. It is tragic.
Think of the promotion that it had, though. I mean, it's no wonder that it did as well as it did when you have, that one sheet of just the egg with the crack with the light coming out of it, and there's that visual, and then there's, of course, in space, no one can hear you scream.
Oh my
which
God.
is like one of the most parodied now slogans that there is. But I mean, what an incredible, succinct way to promote that movie.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Especially, and of course, like it's riding the coattails of Star Wars and sort of Star Wars mania, but like this is a very different tone from Star Wars.
Yes.
Right. Space mania, but yeah, just a different genre in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. All right, the top grossing movies of this year. Where do you think this fell in the top 10, Dan?
Oh boy, I'm gonna guess it was number 8.
Pretty close. It was number 5 in the top 10.
Okay.
Others that round out the list, we have Superman, number 1, of course.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We have The Amityville Horror, a haunted house movie not in space.
Yeah, that does not hold up. That movie.
No, it does not.
We've got Rocky 2, which is sort of like what he was battling out over the summer for that number 1 spot. Star Trek the Motion Picture, also riding the coattails of Star Wars, I would imagine. Mm-hmm. Apocalypse Now, a movie that Adam likes the making of documentary more than the actual movie.
Yeah,
this is true.
Yep.
A movie called 10, as in the number 10.
Yeah, of course. My dad loves 10.
I am not surprised to hear that. This is like very Adam coded. It's an R-rated Blake Edwards romantic comedy starring Dudley Moore.
Yeah.
A movie I had never, ever heard of before.
Bo
There's
Derek.
a woman,
She's a
Bo
10.
Derek?
Yeah, it's Bo Derek.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
She's on the cover running on the beach with her braids. You've definitely seen the cover or the poster before, Nate. Like it's an iconic. It's trust me.
This is like way outside of my wheelhouse.
Oh no, I'm aware, but yeah.
Yeah. And then you also have The Jerk, you have Moonraker, and you have Meatballs. So
I love meatballs.
we're eating well. We're eating well.
That's a great.
in
That's a great
1979. Interestingly, this movie's not critically beloved right off the bat. I think the response was very much like, well, I mean, it looks great, but like it's kind of thin. Like, the characters aren't really there. The plot is a little thin. The themes are a little thin, which like in retrospect feels, bonkers, right? I mean, all of that stuff is very subtle in the film, but I actually think the characters are pretty strong in a lot of ways.
And they're so well established in that first dinner scene, right after they come out of hypersleep.
Yeah.
And they're just sitting around riffing, and it's shot documentary style, so people are just talking over each other and bitching about like, where's my bonus? And like, it's just, I absolutely think that the characters in that movie are really solid.
Totally. Yeah, it's just not exposition heavy, right?
Yeah.
You're just thrown into it, but you pick up on everyone has kind of a game, right? It's like you have Brett and Parker are complaining about like their contract, right?
Yep.
Ripley's kind of the hard ass, and you have anyway. So yeah, we could get into it, but it's wild to think that was the response at the time. Wins the 1979 Oscar for Best Visual Effects and is nominated for Best Art Direction. And of course, it has this huge legacy. Right, we have the quadrilogy, Aliens, Alien 3, and Alien Resurrection. We have Alien vs. Predator, Alien vs. Predator Requiem, and then we have the new trilogy. We have Prometheus, Alien Covenant, Alien Romulus, and then most recently this summer, Alien Earth.
Yes.
So, obviously, like, we don't have time to go through all of these, but do you have any TV shows or movies in this franchise that you have particular love for?
Well, Alien Earth is looking really good. I'm very impressed with it. It cleaves so much closer to the world set up in Alien and Aliens than any of the other movies do, I think. They really do a good job of like retrofitting the technology and making it look like the technology in the movie Alien. I think it really just has that really the same feel and the same tone as Alien and Aliens. So I've got high hopes for that show.
Yeah,
And the fact that it's done by Noah Hawley is just, that guy hasn't had a stinker yet.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I saw Alien Romulus this past year at a press. Well, actually, it was a press and fan screening, which was an interesting audience to see it with because that movie is loaded with fan service.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of takes you out of the movie at a bunch of points, which is unfortunate because I think like there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on in that movie that it didn't need to rely on that kind of stuff. But I did enjoy it, and I've enjoyed when Ridley decided to return to the franchise and sort of do his own, I guess, sequels, eschewing sort of the other stuff with Prometheus and Alien Covenant. I enjoyed those a lot too. But and I also I'm an apologist for Alien 3, and part of that is just because I'm a big David Fincher guy. But
I am
think
a
it's
huge
interesting.
fan of Alien 3. It's
okay. Thanks, Dan.
Tragically underrated movie. And like you said, I mean, it's Fincher's first big movie, right? I mean,
yeah, it was. That was his first studio.
He did 7 after that. So yeah, I mean, it's really solid. And for the longest time, I was getting hung up on things like, well, how can Ripley have memories if this is a clone of Ripley? Why doesn't it have Ripley's memories? Blah blah blah. And I was so hung up on these stupid points that I was not seeing, being able to watch the film just on its own. And I since have come around on that. And I really think that it's a good movie.
I avoided it for years, and I think I only watched it for the first time like maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And it was one of those things where I guess maybe setting your expectations helps, because I went in with such low expectations that I was like, this thing is pretty good, and I don't really know why everybody dunks on it. But when you're coming off of Aliens and expecting more of that, I can understand why at the time of release it didn't tickle people's fancy. But I think there's a lot of really
it's
cool...
so bleak, it's hard to. A lot of people don't like bleak.
Fair.
It starts off with Newt being dead, for Christ's sake.
Yes, I think that's probably turned a lot of people off. But I mean, and it's got one of the most, what I think becomes one of the most iconic shots of the franchise, which is, bald Ripley is sort of like crying and the aliens coming next to her with the teeth coming out. Like, it's just that's the Fincher of it all. Like, the guy knows how to design shots.
And another thing that movie did that was really cool is that it played with the idea of the alien will take the form of whatever life form it's gestated in. And so this one is based on a dog as opposed to based on a human. And and so therefore it looks very different. I thought that was so cool.
I was rewatching the original this time. I was like, knowing that happens eventually, I was like, oh, it's interesting because at one point Ash calls the alien Kane's son. And I was like, oh man, it's like it's kind of baked in there just really subtly that this could be there's somehow Kane is in the alien too.
Sure.
Anyway.
Well, let's unpack the film, and as we said, also as we go sort of talk about the segment in Thanksgiving of Horror. So the movie starts off, and I had to call it out, with what I consider to be, gun to my head, maybe the greatest title sequence of all time, with the letters slowly fading in, and you don't really know what you're seeing until it finally reveals. And I just, I absolutely love that. And Dan, I have to imagine it's because that title sequence takes so long to resolve that you guys couldn't do that in the episode. But was there like a desire to try and crib that, or sort of went with
think, like you said, I think we would not have even been able to attempt it unless we somehow did a parody of it, like doing it super fast and making a point of, but I don't think we even would have attempted it.
Yeah. And I mean, like, the word alien is also like uniquely suited to the way that they do it, right? Because of the diagonals and the verticals and the letters, like it's just remarkable. But I feel like it actually sets up something I'll talk about later in the movie, but it's like a perfect encapsulation of the way the movie works in a certain way, right? Of the kind of like leaning into the unknown, right? And the incomplete is like such a huge part of what this movie is up to, I guess. But yeah, an amazing opening to this movie.
And then you come out of that into another sequence that I just love the patience of, where it just sort of introduces you to the ship. Like you obviously get the exterior shot, but then you get a bunch of just random shots from throughout the ship. And it's just like, it's such a great way of like setting the tone and sort of setting the mood of what you're, and also setting the pacing of like what it is that you're about to experience. I just
The
like,
spaceship waking up basically is what that sequence is. And another thing about that sequence is that it has that little, I don't know what you call those dipper birds, like
Yes,
that
yes.
dip into a, and so seeing that, you're like, oh, this takes place in, if not the real world, like this takes place in a world that's not Star Wars.
Yeah.
You know, there's some grit to that.
Totally.
Yeah, I love that. Growing up, I had one of those dipper birds too, so it's one of those like I have fond memories of what a dumb toy, but like at the same time, like, you know, yeah, I love the attention to detail that they take. I mean, because again, you've got this incredible set. Let's show it off almost.
Right. Well, and just the idea that like in a sci-fi world, everything wouldn't be from that era, right? Things would be from the past. It's like a basic idea, but it does add to that feeling of realism that is sometimes absent when you are in a world and it just all looks like it's of a piece, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, and this is obviously something that you do a takeoff on in Thanksgiving of Horror. Is that something that you like immediately, you're like, well, that's obviously how this is going to start?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You have to start it that way.
Yeah, totally. I'm curious, like one of the things we said right off the top, Treehouse of Horror, the original Treehouse of Horror, apparently the spaceship of Kang and Kodos was partly inspired by the ship in Alien as well. Did you know
I did
that
not
at all?
know that.
Yeah,
I did not know that. Okay.
It's just like the corridors and stuff. The design was partly inspired. There's like one shot in particular where Lisa's like running down the hall and the camera kind of follows her around the corner. That does look like right out of Alien, which I thought was kind of interesting. But yeah, no, I think this like segment really, it feels almost like a little short film, right? Or a commercial, which kind of makes sense because that was like Ridley Scott's background. But it's got this kind of self-contained quality. After kind of coming through this whole ship, you like end on this helmet, this empty helmet that's like looking at
I love that
a
shot.
computer. There's so many moments in this movie that are just like these what the moments where you're like, what am I looking at? What's really going on? And often you just don't get an answer. It's not 100% clear like how any of this technology is working or what it's doing, right? Like Mother, the spaceship's computer, is super mysterious.
Yeah.
It's like not as smart as HAL in 2001,
and
right?
the design of it. The movie is so, in many ways, just over-designed. Like, it's so beautiful and Baroque looking, the look of it. But yeah, like Mother, you know, it's just those thousands of lights lining the walls. It's like, why would they possibly need to build such a thing? Like,
Right.
What, do each of those lights represent something? Do they? And it doesn't. It ultimately really doesn't matter. It just it makes the Mother more of a character,
Right.
You know, that it has that.
And when they talk to Mother, there is no input. Like they're not typing, they're not talking. It's just like their text appears on the screen and then Mother's text appears on the screen. And it's like how are they communicating with Mother? Who knows? It's just like that's just how it works.
It's their version of ChatGPT, basically.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this movie just like, again, it just looks so incredible. And I like the production design combined with the cinematography makes this like one of the best looking movies ever made. Full stop. Like I even 45 years later rewatching it, I was watching the new like 4K restoration. I was just sort of struck by like, nothing looks like this anymore. And
you look at the details on the spacesuits. That's another example of like, why would it have this many, you know, little boxes all over it and stuff? What does that mean? You know, but ultimately it just really looks good. It really looks cool.
Totally. It's interesting because like H.R. Giger gets so much credit for Alien, but like this is all the stuff that he didn't design, basically, right? It was Ron Cobb and then a comic artist, Mobius, who designed like these sort of elements. And, you know, there's the whole backstory of like they all worked together on Jodorowsky's Dune, and then that doesn't actually happen, and they end up kind of on this movie instead. But like the interesting thing is like Mobius was kind of the leading designer on the Dune project, at least that's my understanding.
Yeah.
And then Giger kind of gets elevated on this project and is, you know, doing a lot of the alien parts. But yeah, like the ship is more Cobb.
And the ship and the refinery, it's just so beautiful.
Yeah.
I just saw that at the Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle. They actually have that model.
Oh, really?
Of the refinery, yeah.
That's
and
so
of the
cool.
Nostromo, for that matter. So
Amazing.
I just got to see that just recently.
I love like when Brett's in the sort of like bowels of the ship and there's like all the like water, which like I don't really understand where any of that water is coming from, but like it's just so beautiful. And
He's
like,
in the chain and water room, Adam.
Yeah,
Exactly,
obviously.
you know. Every ship has one of those. But like again, it's Ridley Scott doing his art school production design thing, and it's so evocative, and then it makes those death scenes later on with the alien soaking wet, and it just it just looks so good. I love it.
I never question it because it's like anybody that's ever had an air conditioner that leaks.
Yeah, sure.
You can imagine that on a grander scale, there's some sort of machine or something that does where water is the byproduct of it, you know?
Yeah,
and
totally.
you buy it.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
I want to talk a little bit more about like the sound of this movie. I mean, we touched on it a little bit and how the episode does this great sort of sound alike of Jerry Goldsmith's score, but like this feels like it might be the first time we're getting a score that's like this. That's still got the lush orchestral moments, but also much more sort of like ambient, minimalist, tension building moments. You know, I believe Goldsmith also did the score for Planet of the Apes, if I'm not mistaken, which is a movie we also covered on this show. And that's got like a very sort of 70s honking score, whereas you know, the way this is a little bit more reserved is really, it's much more in line with what we do now with horror movie scores and stuff. And there's sort of like that lineage that I think is so fascinating. But Nate, you were telling me that this is not actually what was originally intended.
Well, from what I was reading, it seems like there was just a lot of conflict on set between Goldsmith and Scott. But basically, Scott kind of saw the score as like a jumping off point. But Goldsmith had written like the whole thing front to back for every moment in the movie. And instead, what Scott does is he basically like cuts it up, moves it to different parts of the movie. He actually took some cues from another movie that Goldsmith scored called Freud. And just like, and dropped those in. So like when the alien is cut open and the acid scene, right? That's actually from Freud.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And the air vent scene too, also from Freud, which is crazy. Like when I was watching the movie, I was like, I had no awareness of this because it doesn't seem out of place at all. Maybe if you're a musician, you're like, it's driving you crazy. You're like, wow, why did that happen? But like, I wouldn't have ever known that. And it's also, I'm like, now I need to watch Freud because I'm like, how in God's name does this music make sense in the context of Freud?
Yeah.
And then I think also the airlock scene, like at the very, very end, that's also just replaced by a completely different composer's music. So it's Howard Hanson's Symphony No. 2 is what that is. And same over the ending credits, that's also that same song. And so it was contentious. I don't think Goldsmith was particularly happy with that. But the interesting thing is, this is crazy to me, he actually worked with Scott again on Legend after all of that.
Of course.
Which I'm like, I don't know how you make that choice, but I guess like glutton for punishment.
Well, it is cool because on the DVD or Blu-ray or even the iTunes version, you can actually watch the film with the isolated score, and they have two options where you can watch it with the score as it appears in the film, and then also like Goldsmith's original intended score.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, and so this afternoon I was just like, I'll just like flip through it and watch a couple sequences. And the opening title sequence that we referenced already, like that's immediately, there's a totally different original opening that you can hear. And it is much more like lush and romantic and kind of what you might expect for the era. And then it gets replaced with the sort of the version we all know and love now. So it's just interesting to sort of go back and forth and compare like what was the intention and what did they ultimately do. But
yeah, I mean, I was wondering if this is one of the first times where you get that like creepy pizzicato string thing on film, because we're still at the point where Goldsmith gets that from like a modern composer who's like not a film guy. Right. He gets it from like Penderecki, which
there's a bunch of that stuff in The Exorcist, but yeah, like we're getting it's of that era. But
interesting.
Okay, let's talk about the cast, because like Dan, you already said, like this is one of the best casts ever assembled, and the characters are just so well lived in. But more importantly, I want to better understand how you guys cast the Simpsons versions of these characters. More specifically, the decision to make Martin our version of Ash.
Which it's so perfect. So perfect.
Martin is such a great villain. He's
Yeah.
I think this was the first time that we really had him play the villain in the episode. I think there have been a couple times since then where we showed his kind of evil side. Yeah, it was really funny for us to just picture that voice saying these very dire things. And it really worked.
I give of my body to become one with the ideal.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's one of my favorite moments is like the airlock opens and he's there and I'm like, oh, is this gonna be what I think? And then when he like locks them in the room with the giant cranberry sauce, I was like pumping my fists. I was so excited. I was like, yes, this is so good. I mean, he doesn't try to suffocate anybody with a magazine, thankfully, but
no.
Out of curiosity, like, how do you make the decision of like, yes, we're definitely going to have Ash in this, but then like, maybe the rest of the crew is a little bit like, it's not as direct, like one-to-one.
Yeah,
like,
I think it was more so than saying that he was Ash. I think we were just saying that like he's the same archetype that Ash was.
Right.
And the rest of the characters for that matter too. It's because we don't have like direct references to Sigourney Weaver that I can think of in it, or Tom Skerritt or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But the idea of the good guy who ends up betraying you in a very disturbing way, that was definitely inspired by Ash, of course.
Yeah. Do you just kind of look for those moments, and that's kind of like how you decide? Like when we were talking to Matt Selman, he described it as like, I just look for a card, right? Like a card that I'm going to put up on the wall in the movie, right?
It's the moments that you remember from the movie as just being really effective emotionally or shock-wise. Basically, just what are the 10 posts of the movie Alien? Let's parody each of those 10 posts.
Yeah.
To that point, like, thinking of the characters in Alien, which are the characters that like resonate most with you? Because again, all of these characters feel so lived in, feel so alive and fleshed out without tons of expository dialogue. I was just curious if there's one or two that resonate with you the most.
I love Veronica Cartwright in this movie. And ironically, her best scene in the movie is a deleted scene that only appears in like the director's cut or something. It's where the team arrives back after the whole egg incident, and Veronica Cartwright sees Ripley and just slaps her.
Right.
She's like, what the hell are you doing? You weren't going to let us into the ship, you bitch. It's just such a great moment that I'm surprised that they cut it out of the theatrical cut. But who knows what goes into theatrical cuts versus. I'm just glad that we have the technology now to see those things
for sure.
In the director's cuts and whatnot.
I think I remember reading something or hearing something in one of the commentaries or whatever that like she was concerned that her character comes off as like the screaming sort of cliched hysterical female kind of thing, and maybe that was part of the choice to cut that scene. But again, I agree with you. Like I think all the characters.
Well, and her death scene, she doesn't scream at all. She just kind of cowers and just wails to herself. Yeah, and it's such an effective way of showing fear that is so much more accurate, I think, than just screaming at the top of your lungs.
Yeah.
What about you, Nate? Did you have a favorite grunt?
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I are aligned on this one. Brett and Parker, and just the dynamic between them. Yeah. I don't think I totally appreciated it in previous viewings, like just their dynamic. It's both like funny and also has some of the most like poignant, again, like world building, theme building stuff, right? Again, like the first conversations about contracts. Yeah. And what the company is like paying them for, not paying them for, and what's in the contract and out of the contract. And it's like, that's obviously what this movie is kind of really about. Capitalism, imperialism, et cetera, but like it does it in this way that is so grounded and funny that you don't even realize that you're sort of like taking in all the themes as they're talking. So I really appreciated that this time.
The scene where Parker is turning on and off the steam vent, in an attempt to not listen to what Ripley's saying is so sweet.
I love that so much. I mean, the other thing, like, I guess we really should address the quote unquote elephant in the room is that, like, we all know Ripley's the main character because we've seen the rest of the movies, but like, she really doesn't become the main character until like, the last 15 minutes of the movie. Like, it's a very subtle shift to it being about her, which is such a, like, it's a masterful piece of writing, the way they handle it, and that it feels satisfying and not like just like sort of the classic horror final girl kind of thing.
I don't know how they pull it off. Honestly, it's crazy. Like, it just feels like a total magic trick to me that, like, they managed to do that, because like, I don't know if I could pinpoint the moment where she becomes the main character. There's sort of that scene near the end where she like asserts control. It's like her and Yaphet Kotto and maybe Veronica Cartwright. I can't remember what the trio is. And they're kind of freaking out, and she's like, no, this is what we're doing. And like, by that point, she's definitely firmly the main character. Yeah. You know, it's maybe when she doesn't let them on the ship, I think
that's what I was thinking of. Yeah. Although that's pretty early on in the movie, but that is definitely, like, you can tell this is a character who has balls, that she's willing to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And she's the hard ass who's like following the rules, but it just so happens that this is the situation where you need that person. Like, she's right. It's a lot like, it reminds me a lot of like The Thing. It's the same sort of vibe of like, MacReady is the hard ass, but he's the person you need in that situation.
Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. The other thing I was struck watching this, again, I don't know how many times I've seen this movie, but I was really struck by Ian Holm's performance of Ash, because, like, again, we know the twist. Okay, he's going to be a malevolent android. But when you know that and you watch it back, there are so many little moments that play differently with that knowledge. Like, they're not like honking like, hello, this is the villain moments, but it's just like cutting away to him whenever they talk about the alien or the possibility of the alien, or should we let the alien go or not. Like, there are all these little subtle things. There's one moment where he sort of like does the classic horror movie like head tilt that, of course, like Ghostface does a bunch in Scream and stuff. But yeah, it's just, I was really struck by Ridley is really giving you all of the clues that this guy is maybe not on the up and up. But if you don't know that, you wouldn't necessarily think, you'd just be like, oh, this guy is, you know, he's the science officer. He's questioning their science, not he's actually plotting for the demise of all of these people.
And he's the one who directly disobeys Ripley and lets them back on the ship.
Yeah. Exactly.
But like, the thing that makes you second guess it the first time you're watching it, I feel like, is like, he's usually on the supposedly more compassionate humanitarian side of the argument. And Ripley's the one being the like, no, we can't. We must quarantine, like,
follow the rules.
Need to like let them die. And so I feel like, number one, because he's always like the humanist in the argument, you just kind of don't suspect he's the bad guy. But it's especially shocking that he is the android as well, because it's not about his humanity. It's about his programming. Like, that's the thing.
Yeah. And it's not like they mention that he's an android at all, but like, you don't know that this is a universe that has androids in it until the moment where his head is knocked off, you know?
Right.
And that's why it's such a shocking moment.
And even like, they're shocked. They're like, oh my God, he's a robot. Like, they can't believe that, you know, this guy was not a human all along.
Yeah. I mean, and I will say, like, this is where I think Hill and Giller do like deserve some credit, because some of the big changes that they made were like about the characters, right? Like, having female crew members, including Ripley, right? Adding Jones the cat, who we haven't talked about, but is like a great plot device throughout this movie, of like getting people to split up or go back or whatever. But then also like these nice moments of like cuddling, Jones are so nice.
It's such a great cat character too, as it watches Brett be killed and torn apart.
Yeah.
And it's just staring, just like you can imagine. It's probably purring. It's so much a cat. It's great.
Yeah. I was in that moment, I was thinking about the scene where Bart and Lisa were watching the blob like kill all of the children. Like, it's sort of playing out on their face with the shadows and everything. Reminded me a lot of that with Jones. And then Ash as a robot, that's also their contribution. So like, they made some really serious changes to the script that I think it definitely benefit the final movie.
Nate, you mentioned the blob monster, and I did sort of want, when we had you, Dan, to sort of talk a little bit about that, because obviously, like, one of the most iconic elements of the Alien franchise is the titular alien. And obviously this, you guys went in a much more different direction with your alien design.
Yeah.
What was sort of the impetus for that? Why did you, I mean, obviously, like, there's the whole like Thanksgiving, the cranberry thing, and it was all grew out of the fact that it had to be a mutated cranberry sauce. What would that look like? That's why we didn't go with the more hard-edged, sharp version of the alien. It is just literally a blob. So that's what cranberry sauce would be. But I did like that. There are a couple moments where we specifically referenced not only the cranberry sauce, but we gave it the ridges that cranberry sauce has. I love
when you dump it out. I like that a lot. That was fun.
Yeah, the attention to detail is fantastic. I mean, I was struck, though, too, like, within the first 13 seasons of The Simpsons, which is, like, that's as far as we've got with the database right now, they never reference the xenomorph, which is really interesting. There's lots of other references to Alien, but not so much the monster. And I was like, when I think of Alien, of course, now it's like that's so much part of the iconography is the monster itself. But like, is it the most iconic part of the franchise, or is there a reason why it's actually other stuff that's getting referenced more?
I would argue that the company Weyland-Yutani is more of a iconic overall character than even the alien is. I mean, it's like the corporation and what evil things are done in the name of the corporation. That's the backbone of the alien stories that followed the first movie, but it was present in the first movie as well, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, I guess part of it too is like the alien gets sort of redesigned with each subsequent film. So, whereas to your point, Dan, like Weyland-Yutani is pretty like the logo changes between Alien and Aliens, but other than that, like the underlying element of this like evil corporation that puts, not just profits over people, but like weapons over people, like that has stayed consistent across the entire franchise, which, so it kind of has become the most iconic element.
And you can buy the logo change because Aliens takes place 65 years after Alien.
Yes, exactly.
Right. And then, I mean, that's especially true when you start looking at like Prometheus, where it's like, you got to follow the big leap of like what this movie's going to be. Yeah. And the through line's very much the company with a little alien DNA, as Scott put it. I was thinking a lot about H.R. Giger watching it again this time. And like the thing about the horror in this that I picked up on the most was I'd never thought of it before as like an H.P. Lovecraft thing.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And it's like, and it totally changed for me, like the phrase, it's a haunted house movie in space. Like, what kind of haunted house movie are we talking about? Right. Yeah. It's not Amityville horror. It's like an H.P. Lovecraft story.
It's very much a monster based horror. Yeah.
Right. And this kind of like cosmic horror of like the unknown. Like, we don't understand how any of this works. Like, you're encountering eggs and like this crazy ship and like, this dead alien with something that burst out of its chest. And like, none of it is really explained. You just encounter all of these images and then you move on before you get answers. Right. And then also the shape-shifting alien, like all that stuff, like it just made me see it very differently when I suddenly was like, oh, okay, it's like a Lovecraft thing. And apparently Giger's book, the one that they got the design for the alien from, is actually called the Necronomicon, which is like an H.P. Lovecraft thing.
Exactly.
And O'Bannon, too, loved H.P. Lovecraft. And apparently his original script was even more like, eldritch horror stuff. And that's actually a lot of what they took out.
No, okay.
It was like literally the language they were using and everything was like out of Lovecraft. And so they kind of like toned that all down.
That's
but like,
so cool.
I think like Scott, totally got it. Like he was picking up what O'Bannon was putting down in terms of the tone of everything. So anyway.
I want to talk about probably what I would consider to be the most iconic moment from the entire movie. And also sort of like get your read on it, Dan, and whether or not there was a desire to incorporate the chest burster into, the episode. Because I mean, again, like that was the moment that was spoiled for me from that AFI special. And there's a part of me that would love to be Men in Blacked so that I could have that erased from my memory and get to experience for the first. Like, what was, you mentioned you watched this on TV as a kid. Like, what was it like seeing that moment for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, I remember just being incredibly shocked by it. I remember being more traumatized by the way he was flailing around on the table before the alien bursts out than I was actually by the alien bursting out. But the emergence of that alien and the baby alien, and all the characters are just so shocked that all they can do is like just watch it as it screams and runs out of the frame. It's like, if they had been prepared and knew that an alien was going to burst out, the whole movie probably wouldn't have happened. They would have thrown a bucket over it, but it's,
or if it had taken the time to sing "Hello, My Baby," they would have maybe been able to like grab it. But unfortunately, no.
You must have seen that before you saw Alien, that moment in Spaceballs.
I think I probably did line up that way. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's an incredible scene. And to your point, Dan, like, it's about like the human part of it that makes it so scary, because
it's flat out body horror. Like, it's the best body horror outside of David Cronenberg. You know, it's like, it's so iconic, and it's so is like rooted in like the horror of childbirth and the horror of, you know, gestating something inside your body that's not you. I mean, it's something that, you know, I don't think men can even fully experience as well as women can. But it's all based in just this stuff, really relatable, uncomfortable. Like, you know, what do you know better than your own body? And to have your own body violated like that is just, it's intense.
Well, and to your point about the flailing, like, I mean, Hurt's performance in that scene is, like, he's selling it so well. It doesn't feel overly dramatic or like it's this perfect depiction of this absolutely horrific moment, and like the way he's convulsing like crazy and then sort of slows down and then just has a few big heaves before the first explosion of blood, which again you're sort of like, what's about to happen, and then you get the iconic reveal of the baby the baby xenomorph. Like, it's just, oh man, it's so good.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, like, The Simpsons has parodied this moment, and also the face hugger before, right? Like, so I think Deep Space Homer has an Itchy and Scratchy episode with a chest burster. And Treehouse of Horror 9 has maybe a moment in one of the segments where, like, Snake's hair attacks Homer's face, kind of like a face hugger. But so I was curious, like, Dan, when you're thinking about these types of parodies, like, how aware are you of like what has already been done on The Simpsons or what has already been done on other animated series or just comedies in general? Like, do you just write first and then figure it out later, or
write first and then figure out later, like, has this been done? Because like, I've seen every episode of The Simpsons, yes, but there are so many of them that they all kind of blur together at this point, and so it is hard to remember like specific. I'm glad you're cataloging this stuff so that we can go to that as a reference.
Yeah. Do you kind of like intuitively know, though, that like some moments you're like, yeah, that's probably been done, so I'm going to like go a different route? Like, is that part of the thinking process, or do you just like go?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the thinking process. But, you know, also on the other hand, it's like we really went into this third segment saying this is Alien. So what are the moments from Alien that we really can do? And it's surprising we didn't do a chest burster sequence in it, actually. Because I probably could have come up with some sort of cranberry-based chest burster. But
but it's great because it's like, I think often some of the best parodies on The Simpsons are the ones that like take the spirit of something and kind of run with it, rather than doing like a fully beat by beat like breakdown of the movie or something else. And like, I think that's what's great about this segment is it does also feel like completely its own thing, even though you know that it's like doing Alien. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, like one of the moments that I love, and I think you referenced it earlier, Dan, which is, you know, the kids are having a conversation and the cranberry alien starts to drip from behind and then grabs one of them, which, you know, is so much like that scene where the alien descends in the background. Like, it's just such a great moment. And it's such a great scare because, again, it's the classic thing of like the audience knows something that the characters on screen don't. And so it works so well. But I love that you guys chose to incorporate that moment into the episode.
Yeah.
Well, should we talk about the sort of end game here of like the hunting the alien and all of that? Again, it's something that's been parodied on The Simpsons. We got Sweet Seymour Skinner's badass song. You have the whole vent hunt is sort of like parodied in that with, I think it's Santa's Little Helper and and
that's directly out of
Willie.
Alien³ with that Santa's Little Helper in the vents. I think is really specifically on that, but yeah.
Yeah, and there is like this kind of through line with Apocalypto where the hunt becomes really primal in this movie, where it's just like heartbeats and fire and like this predator, this animal that like they're trying to kill or contain or whatever. And I just, that part of it really struck me this time, how it just, they get really stripped down. It ends up being very low tech, considering it's a sci-fi movie. And just frantic. They're like constantly trying to figure out what their plan's going to be.
It's not a spaceship that has weapons necessarily, so they have to kind of make their own weapons out of what they have, the existing blue-collar tools that they have. He makes a sensor that, that's in Aliens, actually, where he makes the sensor that can sense something based on whether or not the air gets moved in it. But
no, that's in this one too. Yeah, no, that
is okay.
Yeah. It's like super short distance. Like it's like only within the room basically that they can sense anything. Yeah, no, it's great. Like all the improvisation and the limitations they put on what they're allowed to do is really adds to the whole vibe of it. Yeah, and during this scene, I think maybe you were talking about, Dan, the like director's cut versions of this. I had this memory of there being a scene where Ripley finds all the bodies, and it's in there almost in like a spider web situation.
There is that scene in the director's cut.
It's in the director's cut,
and she comes across Tom Skerritt's character's name. He's the one. He's the one that is
Kane.
Yeah.
Oh
Kane.
no, that's her.
Yeah.
Anyway,
he's the one that's hung up
Dallas.
in the alien. Dallas. He's hung up in the alien goop. And Ridley finds him. And I think that at some point, I don't know whether it was only in the script or whether they filmed any of this, but at some point there was supposed to have been a romantic relationship between Dallas and Ripley. And so I think that scene was more intense for that reason, if you had known that like they supposedly had something going on.
Yeah, it's sort of slightly implied, but not like super implied. And well, so this is the thing I wanted to talk about that I teased earlier. So this whole notion of the director's cut, which is really more, it should be referred to as a special edition, because Ridley considers the theatrical cut his definitive, like that is his director's cut. But so I reached out to the guy who produced the quadrilogy box set, along with like tons of other special editions of that like classic DVD era. His name's Charles de Lazarica. Charles, if I mispronounced your name, I apologize. But I had this memory of like, is the director's cut, or is it the theatrical cut? Because like I always want to like try and watch what is the director considers their version of the film. But over the years, this director's cut term has been thrown around so much as a marketing tool that I wasn't really sure what the situation is. So he said that originally they made an Alien special edition that restored all of the completed deleted scenes, and then they screened it for Ridley. He felt it was too long and too slow, which it was, but that wasn't the point of this. It was just to give fans a look at what the film could have been if everything was kept. So he basically said, look, I like this idea of including the stuff for the fans. So what if I go back and I tweak a bunch of stuff to sort of fix the pacing? I'll take some scenes out, but replace them with the new stuff. And so that's what they ended up doing. And they were going to call it the special edition, which was the term that was being used for Aliens. And I think also
Close Encounters.
Yeah, and James Cameron did a special edition of The Abyss, which was the same idea of like, let's finish it to the way that I want to have it. So when Fox was doing the theatrical re-release, they decided, we're going to call this the director's cut because that'll sell more tickets. But Ridley maintains like, no, this is just like a fun thing for fans. If you enjoy it, great. But like the theatrical cut is my director's cut, my original vision. That's the version I'm happiest with. But it's just so it's one of those things that like I just wanted to get it on the record, definitively. It isn't technically a director's cut, but that's how it's referred to now. And we've covered a couple films like this, like when we talk about The Exorcist, like similarly,
Right.
the extended cut is now referred to as a director's cut, despite the director saying, no, the theatrical cut is my director's cut. But
And it's really, it can be really frustrating because when you see all of the scenes, in my brain at least, I come up with what I would actually have done in the movie.
of course.
And it's like, The Exorcist definitely put the crab walk back in, but it doesn't necessarily need some of the additional things. Close Encounters is another one where there are scenes that were in the theatrical version that I remembered as a kid seeing in the theater that were not in the successive releases of it until they did. Spielberg didn't even do it. It was probably the producers of the DVD who did it. So like there are 3 distinct versions of Close Encounters, and none of them are perfect. Like in my mind, in my mind, there's a way to make the perfect movie there, but they either have something or don't have something that I consider essential.
One of our, multiple time guests, Devin Scott, has worked on a restored version of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And it's a great example where it's like, again, like there's been so many different versions. There's a lot of extra content that's been in some of the later versions, but like it wasn't intended to be in it from the director's point of view and all this kind of stuff. There's even been like redubbing of characters. And like finally, they've released this new version from Arrow that is like actually, they've restored all of the stuff from the original that should be in it. They've taken out the extra stuff, but they've done a better job with the stuff that should be there and so on and so on. So it's like, it is possible. We can do it, but it does take a lot of work.
Tell that to George Lucas, because
right.
I mean, look at Star Wars and the amount of versions of that there are now.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're getting to the end of the movie and the end of the episode, so obviously at the end of Thanksgiving of Horror, they plan to force the jelly monster out of the airlock, and it actually works, which is great. And Bart uses a forklift. Was that like a little nod to the power loader from Alien?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Love
That was the power lifter. And obviously the blowing it out the airlock, the first movie I can remember where that's a plot point, we got to blow this thing out the airlock, is Alien, I think.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, maybe there were other movies before that I'm not aware of, but that's the first one I knew.
Yeah, totally.
So,
I mean, I love this ending, and just, I'm a big fan of the double ending. I think it works in this movie. Sometimes that can feel a little cheap, but like, this is one of those ones where you get like a real lull after you think that everything is done. But then you're like, but why is the movie still going?
yeah.
Well, and you get what I think is the best jump scare out of the whole movie when the alien comes out of the wall.
Yeah.
And you've been looking at that wall for so long and you don't notice it at all. Like, it's such, again, speaking to the power of the design of both the alien and the production design, that they're so perfectly intertwined. Like, that's the shot that every time I watch this movie, it gives me that jolt of like, I always end up forgetting, like, that's where he's hiding. It's brilliant.
Yes, and despite her implausible underwear, the scene of Ripley getting into the spacesuit is also scary as hell and feels so tense. Again, like, what can you say? It's like there's a reason why this is a classic, and this ending just like totally sticks the landing, I guess, of what the rest of the movie is setting up.
Absolutely.
Well, before we wrap up, Dan, we like to do something that we call the Simpsons speed round, where we have a couple of questions that we ask each other with relation to the movie and the Simpsons. So feel free to jump in if any of these questions resonate. Are there any moments in this movie that feel like a Simpsons joke but isn't?
I was really loving Yaphet Kotto's acting when like he's sent off to go get fuel for the flamethrower, and he kind of jumps into the room. He's kind of like playing action hero, and it's just like a little moment, but like I could see that being animated into an episode. Adam, did you have one?
Mine is just like the dialogue line of "Back to the old Freezerino." That's just feels like feels like something that would definitely like either Snake would say, or I don't know. It just has a very Simpsonsy tone to it.
I love Yaphet Kotto frustrated saying, "I want to go home and party." It's like, oh my God, they're going to force me to go down to this planet when I could be going home.
Yes.
So great.
Okay, next question. Did you learn anything about The Simpsons from this movie?
I don't think so from this one for me. But,
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have one, Adam?
I was surprised by, for what an important and iconic film it was, that it's remained relatively untouched, at least in those early seasons. This is like the sci-fi horror equivalent of The Godfather or Citizen Kane, so for it not to show up as often as those is a little bit surprising, but at the same time, it's a genre movie, so really it only sort of feels appropriate to riff on when you're doing like a Treehouse of Horror or, you know, a spooky moment in an episode. So I understand why it maybe can't be covered as much, but I did find that a little surprising.
Sure. But now it's been rectified.
Exactly. Does this movie still have some juice for more Simpsons parodies?
Dan, I mean, what do you think?
I think certainly like killing somebody with a magazine is a reference we could try to do something with.
That's a good one.
You could riff on the titles. I mean, again, I know that with 22 minutes or 21 minutes or whatever it is now, you can't do a full 5-minute reveal of something, but I could see you guys doing something there. Like you said, almost like Homer fast forwarding through the titles because they take so long or something like that.
That's probably how we would do it. If you really commit to the joke, you can get away with it. I don't know if you remember the Manichek episode of The Simpsons. The character Manichek, he's like a detective. It's based on the TV show Banachek from the 70s.
Okay, yeah, of course.
So we would, and that show, you know, back in the early 70s would have scenes where you would watch him like park his car and get out of his car and walk all the way to a building.
Yep.
And that just never happens anymore. So that was an example where we really committed to, okay, this is going to be a long joke. You know, so there could be some wiggle room where we could fit in a parody of the opening sequence. Definitely.
I mean, my all-time favorite Simpsons joke is the Sideshow Bob rake joke. I mean,
Sure.
I'm not picking anything deep cut here, but like, and it's because of how long that joke lasts.
It comes full circle where it gets old and then it gets funny again.
And it still makes me howl with laughter every single time.
Yeah,
sure.
Are there any characters in this movie that could become a recurring Simpsons side character? Nate?
I don't know.
I mean, I think you kind of actually almost said this, Dan, but I could see like the sort of Ash persona becoming a bigger part of Martin Prince's personality, right? Like of just being like a canon thing, not a non-canon thing, feels like definitely within his register. But that was the only thing that came to mind for me.
Yeah, again, Yaphet Kotto and Harry Dean Stanton, like those two guys kind of have some Lenny and Carl energy. That if you were to do another parody, those are the two guys who would play those parts, I think.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, I like them as a comedy duo.
Yeah. And finally, are there any other movies by this director or in this franchise that The Simpsons should parody?
Well, okay, so for Ridley Scott, because like Alien, I mean, there's lots, but I would say so. We've already done Thelma and Louise, which I think was like the obvious contender. I'm gonna say Napoleon because I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard it's very weird and like could be quite interesting to draw from.
Yeah, I was thinking. I mean, Blade Runner feels like an obvious.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Or to go really far afield because I haven't seen this movie, but I've heard so many jokes about it. House of Gucci, like that. Oh, you know,
sure. I have seen it. It would work.
There you go. So just the accents
wild.
alone feel like something that The Simpsons would love to take on. But well, that brings us to the final wrap up where we ask the question: do the strengths outweigh the weaknesses? Dan, would you recommend people watch this movie?
Yes.
Fair. Yeah.
Resounding yes.
Yes, exactly. We also always ask like about extra credit or something to pair it with. Is there a movie that you would recommend people check out as well?
I mean, the obvious answer is Aliens, but a movie that you mentioned earlier, I think Life has a lot of stuff to recommend it for fans of the original Alien.
I haven't seen that yet, but I remember seeing the trailer and thinking it looked pretty cool. So, Nate, what about you?
So I went the route of that sort of like Lovecraft line of thought, and the movie that I was thinking about was Annihilation.
Oh, yeah.
which I like. I recently read that book series, which is great, and the movie's nothing like the book, but actually still good. It's just different, and but it has that same kind of like creepy cosmic horror thing where you're like, I don't know that what's happening is understandable to the human mind, right? And like, so I think it kind of hits that as well. And then I couldn't resist because this just felt like so perfect. But there are two things that are not movies that I want to recommend. One, the TV show Scavenger's Reign, which is absolutely incredible. And it's an animated series, and it's about a spaceship that crashes on an alien planet and these humans like interacting with this alien world. But it's like, and it's not really a horror movie or a horror series, but there's a lot of body horror in it.
Yeah. And it's super slow as well.
Yeah, super slow.
Which makes it good.
Yeah, and it's actually got some Mobius vibes, I would say, in terms of the look of it. So very much like it's got a lot of shared DNA in some ways with Alien without as much of the horror tinge to it, but just incredible. And then the other one is a video game called Live Alive, which is an old video game from I think the early 90s, but they recently remastered it in the 2D HD sort of style. But it actually has a whole parody of Alien/2001 in it as one of the segments in the video game. And it's just like pitch perfect. So that's a really fun one. If you like movie parodies in general, like that movie's full of them, from like Westerns to sci-fi. So I would highly recommend that.
That's super cool.
Adam, what about you?
I would just recommend buying the Alien box set and watching everything, but specifically the Alien 3 making of documentary. It's called Wreckage and Rage, and it's directed by the aforementioned Charles de Lauzirika. All of the making of documentaries that are out, and they're all like 3 hours long. Like they're longer than the movies themselves in most of the case. But they are this incredible sort of film school look into how these things are made. But the thing that makes the Alien 3 one so fascinating is that it really digs into the disastrous making of that film and how they sort of had to try and make it work despite all the odds working against them, including like the cinematographer had to leave halfway through. It's just like everything that could go wrong went wrong on that movie. But I think that they actually managed to make something out of it. And then the other thing is another Ridley Scott movie that like every time I watch this, I'm reminded that, I want to rewatch this, which is The Martian with Matt Damon, which is just very different tonally, but it serves as a reminder of like Ridley Scott's achievements as a visualist, but also that like he can do this sort of same thing but as more of a comedy and less of a horror movie, and I really love that movie. So with that takes us to the end of the episode. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you and getting to hear these behind the scenes stories of how our favorite show is made. Is there anything you'd like to plug before we go?
Not necessarily, just we got a lot of good Simpsons coming up. I did an episode that is all about children's books. So it has like the Simpsons world animated in the style of like a dozen different children's books. That's really cool. That's coming
awesome.
up.
That's
so look forward to that.
Well, that's cool. That's fantastic. Well, thank you again so much for joining us. And maybe Nate and I will finally watch Apocalypto and you can come back and tell us all about that.
Okay, great.
Speaking of, here's the shot of Mel that is from the trailer.
Oh, my God.
So that was hanging in my bedroom for many years.
That is so ridiculous.
But
it's been super fun, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Dan. We really appreciate it. Well, that takes us to the end of this episode of the Springfield Googleplex, the movie podcast for Simpson fans. If you enjoyed what you heard, please leave us a review and share the episode with the Simpson fans and film buffs in your life. We've also set up a support page on our website where, if you want, you can throw us a couple of bucks to help cover the costs of making this show. We really appreciate it. And until next time, Nate,
we'll see you around the Plex. Yeah, loved your figurines, by the way.
Yes, but so this is an audio podcast, not a video one. Okay,
it is.
So I don't need to bother with the figurines. All right, I get it.
You can
but
talk
if you
about
want,
them, though.
You know what? If you want to hold them up for a second, what I will do is we'll snap a screenshot of it. Here, I'm going to pin you, and then we can just sort of see, and then we'll put it on our social channels when we post this. There we go. Okay. Yeah,
we got Brett and Ripley.
Amazing.
I love the Brett because that's just the extra deep cut.
It's a Harry Dean Stanton action figure.
Exactly.
Not a lot of people can say they have one of those, I think.
No.
All right.
Okay.